So Sabrina Carpenter performed at the BRIT Awards on Saturday, and people are losing their minds over it. It quite literally created the controversy that polarized the UK. The sexual nature of the performance elicited a pretty split response. While some viewers saw it as a rebellious triumph of a woman just being confident in her sexuality, others saw it as inappropriate because it aired before the UK's 9 p.m. watershed. If you haven't seen the performance, don't worry about it. I'm gonna fill you in, and I'm gonna break down why the UK is so upset, and if their upset is reasonable. But before we dive in, make sure you like this video, hit that subscribe button, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a future upload. All right, let's begin. First, if you haven't heard of the BRIT Awards, they are the UK's biggest music awards ceremony, and they're hosted annually, and they recognize artists across 12 different categories. It's basically the British equivalent to the Grammys, and not only did Sabrina Carpenter open the show, but she was the first non-British artist to win the Global Success Award.
I love you so much. This is all because of you, and this is for you. Thank you so much. Cheerio.
Initially, this all seemed fine, but then she changed into a red lingerie outfit, and from there, the rest of her performance was pretty controversial, evoking mixed emotions because of the sexual nature of the performance, the sexual activities involving the use of the King's Guard uniform, and the lack of compliance for watershed. Now, a term you might not be familiar with is watershed. In the UK, watershed compliance refers to the time after 9 p.m., when broadcasters can show content that is not usually suitable for children.
I just a baby.
But you still had to say, okay, mom.
I just a baby.
This can include sexual content, inappropriate language, or violence, and this is regulated and monitored by Ofcom, which stands for the Office of Communications. Ofcom is Britain's independent regulator for communications and broadcasting, and it basically acts as a boundary to protect children from seeing things that they might not be ready to see. Now you're probably starting to piece together where I'm going with this. Yes, Sabrina Carpenter's performance aired pre-watershed at around 8:20 p.m., which is 40 minutes before sexual content is allowed.
Oh no! Oh no! No, 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 no.
Upon the start of her performance with Bedcam, Sabrina appeared in this big red heart-shaped bed. She had dancers all around her, and everybody was wearing lingerie. They were performing provocative moves like spreading their legs open, putting their legs up in the air, bouncing up and down, and doing any other kind of sexual moves you can think of.
I bet we'd have really good.
Viewers were caught off guard because they're not used to seeing a show like this air pre-watershed. They usually just trust Ofcom to handle everything, and the majority of upset has been coming from parents and grandparents who have no idea who Sabrina Carpenter is, didn't know what to expect, and they just wanted to watch the BRIT Awards with their children or their grandchildren. And just like every pissed off person does, they took to X with a storm of posts. One user writes, "It seems feminism has lurched back 40 years at #Brits25. Sabrina Carpenter and all her mates opening the show by opening their legs. Bit unnecessary and not great for young girls watching their role model. #the BRIT Awards." Another user writes, "Controversial opinion, but I thought Sabrina Carpenter's performance on a TV award show was absolutely tasteless. It gives me the ick every time it pops up on TikTok." Another user writes, "Okay, maybe I'm getting old. I can live with that, but surprised the Sabrina Carpenter set was allowed before 9 p.m. at the BRIT Awards. Glad my son's more interested in gaming." And I guess that's a fair point. I mean, if you have really young children and this is their first exposure to something sexual, that might be kind of a hard conversation to have with them and for them to understand. And there were other users who weren't necessarily concerned about their kids, but they just didn't like the performance. One user writes, "Sabrina Carpenter's opening at the BRIT Awards. It's cool to be sexy and empowered. Unfortunately, this throwback was none of those things. Cheap and tacky." And this other user points out a much broader topic of hypersexualization within pop culture as a whole. They write, "This hypersexualization of everything in popular culture is disgusting. The Sabrina Carpenter performance is a disgrace. She's more like an OF slag. Slag. That's gotta be the most British thing I've ever heard. Kids will be watching this for sure. This is actually effing disgraceful. The Brits didn't used to be so crass and vulgar." This is definitely the most British post we've heard. A slag? A slag being so crass and vulgar. And then there were those that thought it was a disgrace to the British culture as a whole because Sabrina was sexualizing the Royal Guard uniform. Now, if you didn't know, the Royal Guard is a part of the military specifically designated to protect the royal family. In one part of her show, the camera pans in on Sabrina and a Royal Guard being face to face. Sabrina slowly lowers out of the shot, and all of a sudden the King's Guard turns to the camera and winks, implying that Sabrina performed a sexual act on the guard. However, like I said at the beginning, it wasn't all negative. The emotions were pretty mixed. There were plenty of people that saw this as a rebellion. One user writes, "Sabrina Carpenter at the Brits doing bedcam before the watershed is absolutely iconic. She's a sexy little lady who wants everyone to feel sexy for themselves, not for other people. Go cry about it to Ofcom." Another user writes, "The British people are right. Sabrina Carpenter's performance at the Brits was inappropriate and unacceptable. Anyone who has tickets to her show in London should be ashamed and transfer them to my Ticketmaster account so I can safely get rid of them with a heart. Sabrina Carpenter tickets are pretty expensive, so she might might be onto something. The day after the Brit Awards, Sabrina cannot hide from this backlash. It's absolutely everywhere. So she hops to Instagram to comment on the matter, and she posts a picture with the caption that says, "Brits, I now know what watershed is." Obviously, she's teasing with this caption a little bit. She does not care about watershed. And honestly, that leads me to my next big question. Are these concerns valid, or is the UK just overreacting? And I got two thoughts on this. One, if Sabrina didn't know about watershed before her performance, then should people be mad at her? Or should they be mad at the Brit Awards or whoever booked the show? I mean, everybody knows that Sabrina's repertoire is filled with sexual content. Like, did nobody watch the rehearsal? Did they expect any different? And two, this is definitely not the most outrageous performance to take place at an awards show, not even the Brit Awards show. In 2011, Rihanna performed at the Brit Awards. She performed her song S&M, which stands for sadomasochism. I remember watching this in 8th grade. I'm just gonna say, pretty life-changing moment for a young guy. She was wearing a tight leather bodysuit and her dancers were wearing bondage-style outfits, and the choreography was suggestive too, with whipping motions and simulated restraints.
I may be bad, but I'm perfectly good at it. Sex in the air, I don't care, I love the smell of it. Six little stones may break my bones, but chains and whips excite me.
And this also aired pre-Watershed, and Ofcom received hundreds of complaints, but it ultimately cleared. Also, does nobody remember the crazy Miley stage in 2013 where she performed at the VMAs? She had like a giant foam finger and started touching herself on stage. Personally, I think this whole Sabrina Carpenter drama is a little bit of an overreaction, but I think it's also generational. I think parents and grandparents who probably don't know who Sabrina Carpenter is are trying to trust Ofcom to regulate what goes on their TV so that they don't have to worry about what their kids or grandkids are seeing. If I had little kids, I probably wouldn't want them watching the performance. Then again, I know what to expect from Sabrina. And also, on the other hand, your TV remote literally has an off button, so if you don't agree with the content that's being shown, you can literally turn it off. So yeah, I think it's an overreaction. I don't know why people are raising their blood pressure over this. Like, calm down, Karen. It's okay. You'll get through it. But because it's international news, there's also larger topics at play here. For example, in the UK, provocative content is definitely regulated more than it is in the US. There's also that common gender dynamic where there have been men that have had performances where they or their dancers are dressed really inappropriately or doing inappropriate suggestive dance moves, and they get far less backlash. Personally, even though I'm 26, when it comes to pop culture, I'm a little old school in my views. I don't like the idea of hypersexualizing men and women, especially when it's used to replace talent, but that's kind of the way the industry is going right now. As always, I want to hear from y'all in the comments. What do you think about the Sabrina controversy? Do you think it's justified, or do you think it's an overreaction? And if there's any Brits watching this, I want to know, is the American media making this situation seem much bigger than it actually is in the UK? Because they do that all the time over here, and we just never know. Thank you for spending this episode with me in the classroom. I'm Joe Wheatley, and I will see you in the next video.